It is my favorite time of day. I just got out of bed. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. It's not 100 degrees outside. It's going to be in the high 90s later on today here in Alabama. But I love this time of day when I can get up and I don't have to work today. Thank the Lord. I do have a doctor's appointment. But it's calm and it's peaceful and it's still. It's relatively cool out on my deck where I am. And I'm just sitting here at 4 o'clock in the morning, enjoying the solitude and a cup of coffee or cups of coffee. And I've been reflecting for several days about the state of our nation, the United States. And I think that you can break down the American people into really two categories. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. Because the categories I break Americans down to um, are basically Americans who view their government as their mother or their God or their provider or the source of their sustenance. That would be one group of Americans. And the other group of Americans would be those who prefer a life of freedom and liberty and independence from the government and from any other entity providing for them. These are Americans who prefer to go out and make their own way through life. Um, they work, they provide for themselves and their families. They pay their own bills. They're not looking for handouts. They're not looking for aids. They're not looking for somebody else to buy their groceries for them. They don't view the American government as a messianic type figure. They want to control their own destiny. They want to control their own futures. They want to pursue freedom and liberty and not be subjected to the encumbrances that come with making yourself ostensibly a slave to the state. I'm in that category because the more that you cede your liberty and your freedom to the American government, which is all too happy to take same from you, the more freedom and liberty and independence you lose. And I don't want that. That's not my ideal life. And I think that that's where we break down as Americans into two separate camps. I have never taken one red cent from the American government in terms of um, any sort of benefits or I don't know, what do you call it? In any sort of we used to call them food stamps or things of this nature. Now, I'm not here to dog people who are truly in need. I'm not opposed to helping people who are in need, although I will say that I believe that while we should be charitable, and I really believe that those of us who have worked hard and made a decent living, we do need to be charitable. There are people who do need help, and I am very well aware of that. But I believe the best way um, to help people is through private charitable efforts, private charitable organizations and foundations. The best would be hand to hand. If your neighbor is in need and you can help him, I believe you should. But I don't believe guns should be involved. I don't believe coercion should be involved. I don't believe anybody should have, a gun at your back or a knife in your back and compelling you, uh, possibly against your will, to fork over um, your time, talent, or treasure and redistribute it to someone else. I don't believe that's the most effective way of charity. And when that happens, when the government enters the picture and they get into the redistribution game or the charity game, it often embitters people who play by the rules and go out and make a living only to have their funds taken from them by force. I think this is cruel and heartless and ineffective, largely ineffective. And I think that's easily borne out. If you go into the projects of any large American city, you'll see what I'm talking about. We have people who are born into this nation. This is a generational problem, folks, who from birth see the government as being the provider of all of their resources. There's a big difference in somebody who works hard and acquires the things that they have via industry. They purchase a home or they purchase a vehicle. They own these things and they have done so by the sweat of their brow. They've got skin in the game, and so they have much more of an appreciation for the things that they own because they acquired these things via industriousness, via hard work. Whereas someone else who is given housing, given food, given benefits, given shelter, given all the amenities of life or luxuries, quote unquote, of life, they have no real appreciation for it, generally speaking, because they never had to work for it. Now, I'm a throwback. I wasn't raised that way. I was always raised to work. My father used to tell me and my brothers famously, son, you're going to learn how to work. And he wasn't kidding. I have been working my whole life since I was a teenager. I had to work around the home. I'm not talking about working out in the fields picking cotton. I never did that. But, I had chores to do at home when I was young, from as far back as I can remember. And by the time I could get around 12 or 13 years old, my father owned a auto repair shop, and he had me come over there and start doing janitorial work, sweeping up and mopping. And when I was able to finally to drive, he would have me get in his service truck and go out and pick up parts and things of that nature and do some work around the shop, oil changes, just light duty sort of stuff. And since that time, I've always worked. I've always had a job. I've always acquired whatever I have acquired through my own work and my own industry. And I believe that's the way it's supposed to be. But we have, as I say, a whole generation of Americans who don't believe that. They believe that this faceless bureaucratic entity known as the federal government is supposed to provide all these things for you. Folks, we've got two categories of Americans. We've got givers and we've got takers. And it is for this reason that we have a political divide, which is roughly, from my observation, split about down the middle, 50-50. That's why our elections are so close. Generally speaking, I would say that Trump voters, as opposed to Harris or Biden or Obama voters, are between these two camps. People who align themselves more so with Donald Trump. Not that they agree with Trump on everything. I certainly don't agree with Trump on everything. But Donald Trump more reflects the views that I'm stating here than a Kamala Harris or a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama does. But half the country roughly disagrees with me, and they believe that from birth, the government is their savior, the government is their provider, the government is their Jesus. And so 50% of these people would vote for Barack Obama. 50% of them would vote for Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won, if you remember, the popular vote. She defeated Donald Trump in the popular vote. Donald Trump won the Electoral College. Thank God for the Electoral College. Otherwise, people in these large population centers would determine the fate of the nation. electorally speaking. America is divided in another way into two camps, and that is cities versus counties. If you look at all the major American cities, the New Yorks and Philadelphias and Dallases and Atlantas and LAs and San Franciscos, it's largely a concentration of those who view the government as messianic. And those in the counties, the more rural areas of America, these people, generally speaking, are more aligned with the views that I espouse, which are the views of being of embracing self-determination, rugged individualism, hard work and industriousness, and making your own way in life without having to be encumbered or being a slave, if you will, to the American government. Folks, there's two things that I want from the American government. Just two things. This is what I want. I want the American government to do what I cannot do. I want them to defend our coasts and borders from enemy invasions. That's what I want. That's the first thing I want. I want them to defend our coasts, our borders, our airspace from enemy invasions. The second thing I want the government to do, the second thing I cannot do, that I want them to do, is I want them to punish criminals. That is to say, anyone who would deprive another citizen of life, liberty, and property. Now, I can do that to some extent on my own property, but by and large, we need the government to do what we cannot do, generally speaking, which is to punish criminals, those who would deprive another of life, liberty, and property. People who do such heinous acts should be caught, apprehended, placed in a jail somewhere, and made to stand trial and pay for their crimes. That's not a big ask. That's normal. Those are the things that I want the government to do for me. And I believe that is what the founders and framers had in mind when they talked about the government promoting the general welfare. I believe that was the idea. You know, in the beginnings of America, we didn't have a welfare state. We didn't have this myriad of government programs that we are told are to provide for the poor. We didn't have EBT cards. We didn't have food stamps. We didn't have government housing. We didn't have all these things. Of course, those who embrace such ideals would say, well, that's what they mean when they say in the Constitution, when they say that the government should promote the general welfare. Well, my counter to that is simply this. If that's what they meant, then how come these things are such recent innovations? Is it possible that Roosevelt's New Deal and LBJ's Great Society were not so much acts of compassion as perhaps vote buying? LBJ may or may not have said, if we pass the Great Society, ostensibly is what he said, that we'll have these people who are dependent on such programs voting for us for the next 100 years. Whether he actually said that or not, I don't know. I can't verify that. But it would be consistent with the general sentiment, if you ask me. What we have here in America on election day is people who are voting for someone who will provide for us those two things that I just mentioned versus the other segment of society, which in every election votes for Santa Claus. What can you do for me? What can you give me? Can you house me? Can you feed me? Can you provide entertainment for me? Can you give me cable television so that I can sit home all day and watch reality shows? That's their life. I think it's sad, really, because it's slavery. People should get out, get up, go to work, provide for themselves, provide for their families, and not have a government basically with a gun in their back, because these so-called benefits come at great cost. They come, the more that you receive from the government, the more of your personal liberty the government requires of you. If we're going to give you these benefits, then you're going to live the way that we say you're going to live. I don't want that for my life. I don't want to be a bought man. I don't want to be owned by any government. I want to own my own life. I want to determine my own future. I want to live on my own terms without having to be beholden to a faceless bureaucracy in Washington or a state capital. And that's what this is all about. That's what, in my opinion, these elections come down to. People who want government to be their Lord and Master, and people who do not. Now, sadly, if we do put a Republican into office, this rarely changes anyway. Indeed, Donald Trump, as I have noted on my channel, is a fiscal nightmare. He doesn't cut government programs. He doesn't cut spending. I wish he would, but he does not. Consequently, we stand in a situation where we are $35 trillion in debt. This is not sustainable. There is going to be a collapse sooner or later, a financial collapse in America. And those who have invested themselves and their well-being with the American government are going to be encountering a harsh reality ultimately, if you ask me. So that's what we have, two kinds of Americans, those who want liberty and freedom, and those who want government to be their daddy, their Santa Claus. I don't mean to come off as sounding heartless and uncharitable, because I do realize some people are in a tough plight and we do need to help them. And I encourage you, if you are in America and you have the means, to help people, to be charitable. This is the best form of charity, personal charity, in my opinion. Not something you can legislate, not something you can require. But as I said, so many people are embittered about such things because so much of their treasure is taken from them by force, by the force of law. Every year I have to write this huge check to the IRS, and they take these things from me. And some of it's legitimate. I'm not anti-tax. I stated earlier what I expect from my government, and that takes money. I get that, and I'm willing to pay for such things. But there's so many frivolous items in our budget, if we have a budget anymore. Nobody talks about it anymore. That it's a tough pill to swallow when you're having to finance such frivolous items in our budget. I see all the time, apparently able-bodied people in grocery stores filling their buggies with all of their items, paying for these items with EBT cards, and loading these items into Cadillac Escalades, for example. I've seen that. That's not right. Able-bodied people. Able-bodied people should be working. There's always jobs. I've never had a problem getting a job. There's always something to do. It might not be glamorous. It might be cleaning toilets, but people need to work. We are designed by our Creator to work. We should be working. We should be making our own way. We should be taking care of ourselves and our families. That's our duty. But that's where we are today. Two kinds of Americans: those who embrace and love liberty and freedom, and want control over their own lives, and those who view the government as Santa Claus. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Everybody go out there, have a great day. This is Trailer Trash Tim, and I'll see you soon.